Started. We're at 5:07 and we have a quorum, and I think Anjali's on her way back. So I didn't know this, so I'll say that our meeting is being recorded by video cameras throughout the room, and so when you talk, turn your microphone on. And I don't think there are any other technical comments to the meeting for once, so that's good. So welcome, everybody. Thanks for coming. I think we will, Megan has got the roll call, so I think we'll launch right into our agenda, which is our time for public comment on items not on the agenda. And I don't know, I know we have a couple members of the public in the room, but no one is here for public comment. All right, very good. Then I think we can proceed to our, to disclosures and recusals. Does anyone on the commission have any disclosures or recusals to make under the ethics code based on tonight's agenda? All right. Seeing none, our schedule of meetings, our next meeting is only 4 days from now on Monday evening at 5:30. It's a virtual meeting, and then 2 weeks after that on March the 3rd. So if you have, anyway, if people can't make it or something, just make sure you email me and Megan and we'll know. All right. All right, and then we will get to our special items of business. So thanks for coming to our in-person meeting, and I will hand the floor to Heather Strouder, right? All right.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Heather Strouder with the Department of Planning, Community and Economic Development, and it's great to be here with all of you. Good to see you. I'm going to start by providing an update on a couple. Let's see, let me just get this going here. Some basic housing updates, and then our colleague and Director Matt Wachter will come and provide an overview of affordable housing tools as the next item. So in the big picture, as many of you know, we are facing a pretty dramatic housing need in the city and the county, actually, and we've set a really aggressive goal for the next 5 years to try to achieve 15,000 new homes by 2030. So over a 5-year period, and that would be counting new homes. When formulating this goal, we had to rely a lot on our own population projections, which I know have been explained to the Plan Commission, and obviously those vary over time, and we continue to change those projections as the years go by. But when we look out to the next 5 years, we're expecting to add about 9,000 or 10,000 new households in Madison. And then, as many of you will remember, we have a really low vacancy rate. And so in order to bring that vacancy rate up to a healthy level of about 5 or 6%, we need about 15,000 new homes in the next 5 years. And this goal was really well grounded in Dane County's regional housing strategy that was adopted just last spring, where they actually allocated sort of assigned housing to all of the communities in the county, from the smallest of towns to Madison. And when you look at just kind of the annual housing needed up to 2030, it's a little over 15,000. So 15,000 round number, we went with that. You can see from this simple graph here that, you know, while we've added 10 and 12,000 households per 5-year period recently, this is an aggressive goal. It's over and above sort of the pace that we've been adding. And perhaps even more aggressive, we've set a second goal to, and we've really relied on Dane County for this goal as well. 1/4 of the new housing should be affordable and long-term. And what we mean by affordable in this case is a dedication or a legal obligation to long-term affordability that really meets the needs of households that are living at 60% of the area median income for rental and up to 80% of the area median income for owner-occupied homes. Over the past decade, you know, you can see here in purple the amount of long-term affordable housing that's been added in the city over the past decade here. So again, we think that this new goal of 3,750, very aggressive and perhaps achievable still. So we're trying to really aim high with these big picture goals. Mayor Rhodes Conway has just released an update to her Housing Forward initiative, which was first announced back in 2021. And what she's done in this update is really looked back at the last 3 years, what have we accomplished from 2022 to 24, and set some pretty ambitious goals for the next 2 years in the next steps. And I'm just going to go over this. You have a copy of the Housing Forward in your packets, I understand, and I'll try to hit some highlights here in the next few minutes. So first, and perhaps the closest related to the Plan Commission and a lot of your work in recent years, is goal number 1, which is to increase housing choice. As many of you will know, the Plan Commission's been instrumental in, obviously, the adoption of long-range plans that will help us match our growth projections, and zoning code changes in recent years to promote more housing. Specifically, I just want to mention the transit-oriented development overlay and several changes to accessory dwelling units and other small-scale housing as well. Many of you have spent a lot of your own time really thinking through that and putting forward policy change that the council has adopted in recent years. And then finally, another aspect of Plan Commission involvement is proactive rezoning. So shortly after a plan is adopted, and I want to stress maybe the Oscar Mayer plan or the plans around the mall areas, a year or so after the adoption of those plans, the city actually proactively rezoned some of the areas to provide a really clean path for housing in those areas. And the Plan Commission, heard many takes on that and has been involved in that effort as well. And so really a lot of accomplishments in the past few years have been squarely in your wheelhouse as Plan Commissioners. And looking forward, we expect that some will be too, and really look forward to the Plan Commission, putting forth ideas around some of the details about the mayor's next steps. One of the things that we've seen in Madison and really far beyond Madison is a slowing and really stoppage of condo construction, residential condominiums, and we want to try to explore state policy support for condominiums. We want to try utilizing tax increment financing for affordable home ownership, particularly, in one area that we're looking at doing that soon is on the former Voight Farm property on the east side. This third one, we want to still be looking at our zoning code to look at further tweaks and changes to process that can really help clear the path for more housing, especially at that smaller scale, the missing middle housing that we haven't seen much of in the past several years. Pre-approved plans for accessory dwelling units. Can we make it a little bit easier for property owners to construct that accessory dwelling unit by having a plan that they can start with at the building inspection counter? And then finally, continue with process improvement to maintain pace with development and provide more clarity to developers across the city. And then for goal 2, the overarching goal is to create affordable housing throughout the city. I think the Plan Commission, has really dug into this issue, and Matt Wachter will go into it more. The Plan Commission is aware of some of our limitations around affordable housing, but our city, through investment of money particularly, has really achieved quite a bit over the last 3 years, and we know we're nowhere close to meeting the affordable housing needs in the city and beyond. In the past 3 years alone, we've committed nearly $60 million as a city to developers to support 1,700 long-term affordable rental homes. And at the same time, we've secured enough property around the city to, as a city, to actively be a partner in developing a variety of affordable housing initiatives across the city that should amount to another 1,700 homes in the years to come. And then finally, surely a more cost per unit, but we've spent about $1.3 million toward 9 owner-occupied homes that do have long-term affordability. Looking forward, and again, Matt will talk a little bit more about this, but we hope to complete the redevelopment of the Community Development Authority's Triangle site, which you've seen come across the Plan Commission agenda. Continued land banking, especially in transit-oriented development areas, and then the mayor's goal to commit $32 million from the Affordable Housing Fund just over the next 2 years. Things that are really, I think that are not really in the Plan Commission wheelhouse, but are really important, really relate to this goal number 3, combating displacement. And it's not that the Plan Commission isn't interested in this, but the policies that come before you aren't maybe squarely related to it. But our Community Development Division supports building rehab and repairs for individuals, provides down payment assistance through partners like Habitat for Humanity or the Madison Area Community Land Trust that make it to individual households. Property tax assistance for older adults who are nearing, maybe they have fixed incomes and need assistance paying their property taxes. We can provide low interest loans to those households that can be paid back when the property is sold in the end. And then finally, especially post-COVID, a lot of funding going to defend against eviction throughout the city. Next steps, we want to continue working on energy efficiency in affordable rental homes. We want to complete really a broad plan for phased redevelopment of all of our public housing portfolio in the city. And so we want to look at aging public housing and come up with a staged and phased plan for how we can really transform that into modern, high quality, and mixed income housing. And then continued support for, at a smaller scale, continued support for folks who need assistance paying their utility bills through the MADCAP program as well. And then goal 4, the work to end homelessness. The city, especially again, our Community Development Division, spends a lot of time and resources around this goal. Many of you are familiar with the Dairy Drive campground on the city's southeast side, and that did come across the Plan Commission when the zoning for that site was approved. We do have our men's shelter under construction on Bartolon Drive. And then looking forward, what we hope to do is support new shelter for women and children by purchasing property from the Salvation Army in the Darbo-Worthington neighborhood and helping them secure sufficient funds to move forward with a new shelter closer to downtown on their existing site. And importantly, we need to work very hard with partners near and far to secure funding to operate the men's shelter that's under construction today. So that's just a quick update on Housing Forward, and again, that's in front of you, and you can feel free to ask some questions here in a little bit. I want to also show a housing tracker that has just been released that really is a way that the public, public-facing way to track progress toward our major goals that I mentioned at the outset. That goal to add 15,000 new homes in the next 5 years, a quarter of which have long-term affordability. Really feeding into this housing tracker is data mostly from our city's building inspection division. So when building permits are sought or obtained, a particular building enters the system in the housing tracker. So it's tracking buildings that are under construction as well as buildings that are completed. So when that home or apartment building is completed and has a certificate of occupancy, it becomes a completed home and is characterized as such in the housing tracker. We're also keeping track of the long-term affordability, the legally limited cost homes, and making sure that those are flagged so that they can be caught and seen in the housing tracker as well. I'm going to just show a very quick demo of the tracker and then encourage you to take a look at it and certainly let staff know if you see things that you think need to be improved for the sake of clarity or otherwise. It's really a three-page system with the front page here showing our progress toward that 15,000 in 5-year goal. We've had about 100 homes completed yet this year, and over 4,400 are under construction today. And so this gauge is going to show progress toward that goal over time. We have a map that similarly shows where these buildings are completed or under construction. And so this is the one on East Wilson Street, just right by this building. Oh, it's not showing there. Sorry. Oh, my apologies. I need to share a different screen. Okay, here we go. So the tracker itself, this gauge shows that progress, and then the map corresponds with it. And you can zoom in and out and see areas that, that folks might be interested in. And then we will be updating population projections. They're there just for a reference. The second page really focuses on affordable housing over the last decade and where we've seen that occur. So you can see this map here on the bottom shows all of the, again, legally limited affordable housing that has been completed over the past decade. And just like the front page, we have progress toward our big goal of 3,750 homes in the next 5 years. And folks can use this kind of slicer to look at certain years, and you know, if folks are interested in seeing, well, what's happened just over the past few years, that's available as well. And then finally, the third page just shows a broader look at everything that's been constructed and completed over the past decade. And so for folks who are interested in seeing locations of housing completions and locations of housing demolition, and those numbers, you can see how those roll up on the third page. Now, let's see, let me get back to the presentation. All right. And meanwhile, as we worked with the housing tracker, we realized that the data that we're using can also show us more, you know, beyond what we're currently able to share out, and things that we think that the Plan Commission may be interested in seeing. So we're just playing around with visuals like these. For instance, this first one here, we're able to show homes completed by building size, and that may be really of interest when we think about the effectiveness of policies to support missing middle housing. And then, you know, another just example here is we're able to show affordable housing location by whether the city supported it or not. And that can be pretty effective when we see, you know, how well have we been with regard to our policy guidance of supporting affordable housing near transit. So just examples of how the data can be useful in other ways. So we look forward to continuing to, you know, to convey the tracker. We hope that it's of interest to people broadly, and that, you know, that folks across the city can get on board with the broad goal of reaching 15,000 units by 2030. And I think I'll pause here for any questions and discussion before turning it over to Matt.
Questions for Heather? John? Alder, you get.
So, and it may have been in one of those experimental slides, but so if we've got a goal for condos, or so, will we be able to track condos built, or?
Oh, that's a really good question. So our building permit data is blind to whether something's for rent or for a homeowner to occupy. And so we don't have a really easy way to show that, but if we had that data from another source, then we certainly could use a tool like this to show homeownership versus rental. And we have an easy way to show that with regard to the projects that the city is funding. That's data that we'll definitely know.
Heather, I have a question. Is there, I know this is the housing forward framework, I'll call it. Is there a general understanding of what long-term means with respect to affordability?
Yeah, great question. Several years ago, the city used a 30-year commitment. Now the city's using a 40-year commitment. And so rather than complicate it by differentiating between those two different commitment levels, we say long-term. So it's a number of decades, 30 to 40 years.
And there are some projects that are longer, a few, right? That
have forever.
Involved in or whatever.
Correct. Some developments do have permanent affordability.
Okay, thank you.
They're along the lines of what Alder Yeager had asked on the tracker. How about accessory dwelling units? Is there a way do they show up on the tracker as we look at that? Because I know that's an area that has opportunity
That's a great question too. So right now they show up as a single unit. It would simply have a 1 associated with it. But our building inspection division staff are starting to track accessory dwelling units. And so, you know, as of 2024, those are tracked. They haven't been tracked in detail over the past few years, but there should be a way to kind of tease those out and track those over time.
I'm wondering if there's a definition of homes for when we use this data, like
Yes.
1,000 homes?
Sure, another great question. So we're trying to utilize the word homes for any type of housing unit. So it could be in an apartment building, it could be a single unit building, a condominium, any type of home is considered to be a home.
Heather, I know you're just starting to play with, the last slide that you showed about city-supported affordable housing. Will it be possible perhaps to slice and dice that by the source of the funding? That might have been only from affordable housing funds, but like WIDA, county, other, you have all that information, I guess, so.
We have all the information that comes from the city, plus anything that has tax credits associated with it. We'll know those amounts. We've already started to try to look at data that shows affordable housing fund versus TIF, and how the city sources roll up. And we have a good sense in the aggregate of how much we're leveraging as far as what the city investment is leveraging in tax credits, and Matt can talk a little bit more about that. I don't think we yet have a clean data set that shows every single layer, but it's feasible.
Right, I mean, exactly, the leveraging thing is what I was thinking about, how effective is this? So that'll be interesting, thanks.
Yep.
So before I guess this is working. They were very echoey at the beginning. So just before we move into Matt's presentation, I should have mentioned at the beginning just a little bit of context for the agenda that we've put together today. In talking with Emily as she came on as our chair, we were just identifying that you work in the specifics frequently of development projects that are coming before you for various approvals or specific zoning ordinances that we're asking you to weigh in on. And Emily made the great observation that just taking an opportunity to step back and give you some context on the kind of where are we going as a community, what are we trying to achieve in terms of the big picture would be just a helpful orientation as we move into this year. And it just so happened to align timing-wise with the mayor's announcement of the update to the Housing Forward initiative. So it was really interesting to me to be able to work with Heather and Matt to bring this agenda to you all. And as Heather alluded, there are specific parts of Housing Forward, both past and in the future, that really closely align with the kind of work that you are familiar with. Particularly thinking about, Katie Bannon is here, the city zoning administrator, thinking about the sort of policy work that you all do in terms of continuing to advance our zoning code. So I think, tonight, if there's anything that sort of pops up for people along those lines that you want for us to be thinking about as we start to move forward some of the specific goals that are in Housing Forward, we'd love to hear any thoughts or questions that you might have. I think in working with Katie, there are some things that we've been starting to brainstorm that either relate to past discussions that you've had, things that, alders or others have asked us about in the past that we are going to explore. But if there's anything that is on your mind, please let us know. This is an opportunity for those kinds of ideas to be put on the table for exploration too.
All right, so Matt Wachter, Director of the Department, Planning, Community, and Economic Development. Sorry I was late. Triple booked, CDA and another committee meet at the same time, so I was there. So I'm going to cover a lot of the things in our toolkit that aren't planning or zoning related. They sit in Community Development Division, which kind of acts like a bank, Economic Development Division, which operates TIF, and then the CDA, which is a housing authority and owns and operates and actually builds housing. So to start with, things that we can't do anything that looks at all like rent control. So this is in the Wisconsin Constitution. When we had inclusionary zoning, that was found to be too similar to rent control, and then extra rules were passed to make anything that even looks like inclusionary zoning not allowed in the state of Wisconsin. We also can't do anything with property tax abatement, so we can't cut you a deal on your taxes to do things we want you to do. Taxes are uniform in Wisconsin, so that's a tool that some states have that we do not have here. And then we can't add on requirements to the building code. So building code is at state level, so we can't say, yeah, but in Madison, you really need to also add sustainability features or do other things. We're just not allowed to do that per the state. So these are sticks that other places have that we don't have. We are a carrot-only environment when it comes to affordable housing. And you know, the way a lot of our, if you look at sort of the tools that are out there, tax credits and other subsidies, things that we don't directly control, this is the big pot of money. This is what pays for the vast majority of affordability. And those usually flow through, the big ones flow through the state. But then we have a host of other things that we can do. We can have regulatory incentives, city subsidies, and then we can actually do things ourselves. And oftentimes, these tools stack up together. So one deal is going to have tax credits coming from the state of Wisconsin. We're going to put affordable housing funds in, and we might give you some extra height if you're downtown for affordability. So these things are designed to work together when possible, but sometimes they act on their own. Some of the regulatory incentives that we have is a number of years ago, we, as a city, made the decision to waive park impact fees for housing units that signed on for that long-term affordability and entered into that agreement. So this is a cost savings that we can give to affordable homes. I got to use that language. And then more recently, we added the height bonus for areas in the downtown where there's this difference between the number of stories we allow and actual height of the building. There's some play in there, and we can, if people, again, agree to enter into long-term affordability agreements, we can give you the higher of those two to give a bump to those buildings. Right now, it's mostly student housing doing it, but we are seeing other projects try to take advantage of it when it's viable. But really, the bulk of the affordable housing that we do is when we are able to put money into deals, because these drive financial gaps. When the rent is lower, there's usually a financial gap that has to be filled. So the Affordable Housing Fund is really the big thing that we did. So about 10 years ago, the city decided to create a fund where we would go out with requests for proposal to find developers who would build affordable housing. But we get to steer the ship quite a bit because we made a map of where we really wanted to see it, and that's on transit corridors. We made it clear that we wanted to see 3 bedrooms. We wanted to see units that had deeper affordability in the mix. We wanted to see social services, when possible, in there. And so we could really drive the market. And almost all of these deals are getting those federal tax credits. So, you know, for every dollar we put in, they're able to get, you know, $5, $6 of those federal tax credits. And if you look at the Affordable Housing Fund, the city of Madison would get 1 tax credit deal every 2 or 3 years. So our average production of affordable housing was 10 to 15 units per year. With the Affordable Housing Fund, we're driving hundreds of units per year in production, and that production doesn't stop. It just grows every year because the council has decided to keep adding money to that fund every year. So, you know, I don't know what this one means exactly. So, yeah, so, okay. So, yeah, we've leveraged over $200 million of tax credits in the past 3 years. So, again, we put in $10 million every year for 3 years. We get $200 million of these federal tax credits flowing through the state. So, that's what makes those things so powerful. And as you can see, our distribution really mostly is following where we have 30-minute transit. That's the bulk of where we're trying to push units to. Another set of tools that we have is TIF. So TIF, we've done affordable housing, but it's not always the best fit because affordable housing doesn't drive a lot of new taxes. So where we can use TIF, we are. Oftentimes TIF is being used in conjunction with the Affordable Housing Fund. So those two tools work together when we, in certain geographies. So that's one way that we are able to use TIF. More recently, the city changed its assessment policy so that in the case of infill areas, we can apply TIF to help pay for infrastructure that's going to need to be done. So lately it's been we have to add a street through the middle of a site. So we've been able to utilize TIF to help pay for that to accommodate that housing development and infrastructure related to it. And the third thing we're able to do is land banking with TIF. So it's usually in an area where we have other development happening. We can take those new taxes and use it to buy land. The biggest site that we have going for land banking right now is this site that's bounded by Park Street on the eastern edge and North Avenue on the south. So this was formerly part of the town of Madison. So the city has just been picking up one site per year. And by the end of this year, we should have roughly 9 acres that we've put together. The city would then probably put in the infrastructure and we would RFP out individual parcels so that we could say have condos on part of it or a tax credit development on a piece and really build the neighborhood the way that we want to by most likely partnering with developers. But TIF is kind of at the base of that by helping to buy the land. And then the third is funds where we're not giving it to a developer, but we're really giving it to the end user mostly. So the most straightforward way that we do this is through down payment assistance. So if you're a low income buyer, we give you a second mortgage to help buy a home. And we do that all throughout the city. Sometimes we target it to specific neighborhoods, but really some of these programs work citywide. We have programs to help people stay in their homes by paying for repairs. And again, that can go to the individual or it could go through a nonprofit who's going to do the work, but again, it's to benefit the individual homeowner. And then we also have a property tax assistance. So it's a reverse mortgage, but it's not like that. It's not predatory. It's very low interest, and it goes to pay just someone's property taxes to help them stay in that home. And it's these are loans at $6,000, something like that. So a relatively small amount of money, but it helps dozens of people stay in their homes every year. And then there's the one where we are really involved, and this is the most resource-intensive version of this, is where the city really leads development efforts. So I'll walk through the 3 types of that. So the most simple one, although they're not simple or fast, is where the city owns land and we recruit a developer through a request for proposal for them to come in and build something, and we say generally what we want. So this is the Park Cedar Apartments. So we went out to RFP and we said we want a developer who can put in a grocery store, and we would really like to see affordable housing come with it. So we had 3 developers come in, we picked one, they went ahead and built it, and usually kind of after it's built, the city's done, other than we might have a land use restriction or something on it. Stepping up in complexity is where we are really more of a partner in the development. So this is the State Street campus garage. So here we recruited a developer, and the deal would be that we're going to build some infrastructure, we're going to build the parking, but then the housing is built by the developer. But then we're married to that developer forever because we're going to own the parking and they're going to own their building. So we're in it for the long term on those kinds of deals. And Judge Drill Square is a similar thing where we built the garage. We're in each other's business all the time, kind of forever. And then there's really where we're fully in the driver's seat, where we are acting as the developer. And usually this is going to happen through the CDA because they are set up to build and own housing. So right now the Triangle is getting ready to break ground the next month or two. So the CDA went out and recruited a development partner to give us a little extra horsepower because these are really big, expensive, complicated deals. But we have sort of full control over it through the development process. And then once it's built, we will own and operate this forever. So similar things that are, in the pipeline, it would be the corner of Park and Badger, where the CDA will own housing, but we'll have a new public health clinic in there, as well as a new Fire Station 6. Again, we have a development partner, but as soon as it's built, they're going away. We have full control of it. So this is a lot more work, a lot more resources, but a lot more control over what happens. And I can answer any questions.
Yeah, go ahead.
Thanks. Could you just clarify on the RFP style, what happened? Is the city giving up the land or retaining ownership? And you can just explain that.
Sure. So in the case of the Braden lot or in the Park Cedar, yep. So oftentimes we'd sell them the land for $1 as a way to subsidize that affordable housing. But we would then layer it with restrictions that would say you have to stay affordable for the next 30, 40, infinite years, whatever it might be. In this case, you have to have a grocery store in there, and that's part of the deal that you have it. So we switched from an ownership type of control to more of a contractual type of control with them. But we have, I think we've done it where there's a ground lease, but that adds different complexities to it.
Patrick and then Nicole, how about that?
Matt, just a nomenclature question. You refer to federal tax credits, but they're administered by WIDA, right? They're the same thing?
So there's multiple types of tax credits. So the bulk of the money would be federal tax credits that go to the state, and the state makes awards. So the state also changes their criteria of what they're looking for. Every 2 years they shake it up and change what they're looking for. So we have to make sure that our RFP doesn't conflict too badly with what they're looking for. And then there's also a state tax credit that can get layered on top of those credits as well.
First of all, just going back to Heather's presentation and the recent plan commission or the comprehensive plan update we had, I have to say the city does an amazing job tracking goals and metrics. So thank you for this presentation. But I wanted to talk about kind of affordable housing and TIF. And I think Heather is on one of your slides, the 25% of those units being affordable. So like 3,700 affordable units, which is a lot. I think too, we're seeing that kind of transition. I'm sure you guys have noticed this, and that historically tax credit projects have been kind of like mid-sized and mixed income as well. And now they are very large and usually 100% affordable. And, we want a lot of affordable housing. We need it. We incentivize it. We have policies to incentivize it in areas that don't have affordable housing. On the flip side, I'm wondering if we have or are considering incentivizing, market rate housing or kind of missing middle housing in areas that are also experiencing a lot of new affordable housing, just to ensure that we're maintaining a range of housing options and incomes in a certain area?
Yes. So Right, to hit that goal of that many to be affordable, right, that's hitting our sort of peak level of production every year. So I think it was 2023, we funded over 1,000 units of affordable housing in 1 year. And that's largely because we added a couple of straight 4% very large deals to make it happen. So we would have to keep doing that. We'd have to not just go after the sort of mid-size 4+4s or 9% deals. We have to go, sorry, this is like super in the weeds. We have to go for a number of straight 4% deals that are knocking out a couple hundred units at a time, I think, to hit those production goals. But we are starting to see areas where maybe affordable was the first thing there, and we're debating on holding back funding another 200 units until market rate hits, until those units stabilize, because yes, we don't want to have it all be affordable in an entire neighborhood. So, and then even at the Triangle, where we're going from 360 units to 1,200 units, we're bringing back a number of income levels that will not all be deeply affordable or even maybe all affordable. The goal is to have like a much broader mix of income as part of that.
Okay. Thank you.
I thought for everyone's education here, you might talk a little bit about the Element Collective in my district, partly because we've pulled out just about every tool we have in the toolbox to make that work, from TIF to a CDA takeout, all kinds of things that make that work.
Yes. So that deal doesn't match the models that we talked about here because it is kind of a one-off. So this is a deal where we ran out of affordable housing funds last year because we had so many projects come in, but we had a project that's in a very strong TIF district. So our primary tool is to put TIF into it, but then we also, the city gave TIF funds to the CDA to then enter into a contract to buy that affordable housing. When it gets through its initial tax credit period of 15 years, we would then have the option to buy it and then turn it into not public housing, the program, but sort of publicly owned affordable housing through the CDA. And we were able to do that because we had a TIF district that was producing a lot of income because of all of the development at Research Park. So we can't do that every place because TIF districts don't normally have that robust of a set of financials to it, but it's definitely a model we can look at again when it makes sense and when it makes sense for a building to be in the CDA's portfolio.
Thanks, Derek. So this is related to the bonus floors in exchange for more affordable housing units. I'm curious how the city is evaluating that policy and its effectiveness, because I understand it's pretty new, but is this apparently attractive to developers, or is there any challenge in getting more people to take advantage of that?
Sure. So the deals we've done to date are really student housing focused, and they're pretty much all with one developer, with Core Campus. We have one open and our affordable units booked up, but we don't have a huge track record because those buildings are not open and operating. And there it's different because we have a three-party relationship where UW is involved. So they're doing the referrals. They're doing the verification that the right student is getting referred to those units that are going to be affordable, because that's one of the hard parts of doing affordable student housing is that verification, because most students don't really make any money. So how do you find a student that actually needs financial aid because of a broader set of factors? UW already has that information. I think when it comes to market rate developers who are going to dabble in affordable housing, there's going to be challenges because they're not used to screening the other way around, to screen people in who have lower incomes. There's a lot of sort of reporting technical things that, again, they're not used to doing. So we have to build those systems with them and make sure that community development division that'll do the compliance is set up to provide the technical support, but also, do it on a handful of units per building rather than, say, a whole tax credit building. And those systems, I'll be honest, they're not built yet because the buildings aren't far enough along.
And I think there's another layer to this question, which I know that Nicole asked at one of our recent meetings. You saw 2 projects within, 2 meetings or maybe 3 meetings. And I think several of you asked if the developers had considered utilizing this bonus. They were student housing projects, and you had asked if they had considered it, and they said it didn't really make sense. I think in both of those specific cases, there was some other policy route that the projects had to pursue extra stories. I think in one case, there was a reference in the Mifflandia plan, and in another, there was something from the downtown plan that enabled those additional stories to be considered. So when they looked at the kind of project holistically, it didn't make sense then to also try to layer on top of that additional stories through this affordability bonus. Others in this room could speak much better than I could to what the factors are that might influence whether people would decide that that was a worthwhile thing to pursue. Matt certainly mentioned the factor of just like, am I in the business of appropriately administering a program like this when it comes to filling the building? There's some construction technology considerations, just like, does it make sense for this building to get bigger? Will I be able to afford to build it, kind of thing? So, and then I think kind of to your question about our track record, the bonus for student housing is still relatively new. I think some of the one example that you mentioned that we already have a relationship with was something that we sort of worked through before we made the ordinance change that made it explicitly possible for student housing to be able to utilize this tool. So I think I certainly have curiosity about where this will go in the future as well.
Thank you. I have 2 questions. The first comes from Section 3 in the Housing Forward update, and one of the items under what's next is the phased redevelopment of public housing across the city. And I hadn't thought much about that up until this moment, so I'm curious if that's something that CDA or staff are starting to think about, how to fund, how to plan, when to do all of that work.
Yep. So public housing was all built in 20 odd year period, so it all kind of hitting a certain point in its life now. And the CDA had a master plan 10 years ago that sort of identified TRUAX as the first priority and then some other priorities. Then they made a decision that the triangle was going to be the next big priority. After that, the CDA did a strategic planning effort last year and really decided that we need to evaluate all of the properties through a lens of which ones have a financial advantage to sort of move because they could take advantage of a TIF district or a federal program that applied to them. Which ones, based on their physical needs, kind of need to move now, or we're going to be making a multi-million-dollar investment to just keep it operating. And then which sites have the potential to really add a lot of units per the neighborhood plans. So we've pulled a bunch of that information together, and we're in negotiations with Baker Tilly to do an analysis, because we know locally what makes sense, but some of these federal programs are strange in the way that you move something from public housing to, say, the Section 8 program to get the flexibility. And those programs, as recently as this month, change the formula on how they do that. So we need some outside expertise. And so we're working on that to then come up with a more a phased plan, because the CDA does not have the staff capacity to be doing, 4 developments kind of at the same time. And the triangle is big. It's 5 phases. So we have to kind of take this off in bites.
2030s, maybe? Okay. You mentioned a piece of what might be my next question. I was going to ask about the study that I believe Baker Tilly was helping with to study sites appropriate for transit-oriented development opportunities around the city. Does that sound familiar from last year? And if it's available? Is it something that staff have started to use?
Is Baker Tilly doing that?
Maybe it wasn't Baker Tilly.
Oh,
TOD grant?
oh, the TOD. grant?
Okay, maybe that one.
When do you want to speak to it?
So we were able to secure a fairly small planning grant for transit-oriented development, and that was a piece of it, was an analysis, kind of a strategic analysis of the bus rapid transit corridor, the east-west corridor, to look for the highest priority, well-suited sites that the city might purchase. And so, you know, we have a list of sites that, you know, either are on the market or we're, you know, keeping in mind to see if they come on the market, where really the city stepping in seems necessary. You know, we want to kind of limit it to places where the market may not just take care of it, or where there's such a pressure for redevelopment and displacement that it makes sense for the city to step in and secure that long-term affordability.
And so the results of that grant are available now among staff, that, like, it's done and
No,
handy.
we have a final. I'm not sure what the.
I wasn't here for the east-west study, so that's a great question. I do know that we're in the process of doing those explorations along the north-south route. I don't think that there's anything final for that yet, but I don't know about the status of east-west.
One of the tough things about a study like this is that the second the world knows that the city is interested in a site, the price changes.
Yep.
And so it is not a publicly released study, but we're keeping our eyes open for opportunities again where, you know, the city's stepping in to kind of fix something that the market might not take care of, whether that be, you know, the cost of development or, I think more importantly, combating displacement in areas that are quickly redeveloping. But it's not been a publicly released set of addresses, if that makes sense.
Sure, yeah, thank you for explaining that.
Matt, if you can clarify, you had mentioned at some point about looking at 3-bedroom units for affordable housing. Is that?
Yeah, so in the city's RFP, for non-senior deals, we have I think it's a 15% of the units we want to be 3 bedrooms, and it wiggles around that, but it's a higher bar than the state's RFP is going to have, because we were just seeing a lot of deals that kind of took the bare minimum number of 3-bedroom units, so we pushed that up.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you. And then just a follow-up, but looking at smaller scale affordable housing development, do you perceive there might be an opportunity or an appetite at some point in the future to look at different housing forms that would be more infill housing into existing neighborhoods to get kind of these onesies, twosies?
Yep.
And
Yes. So the city runs this tax credit RFP every year, but every other year they run another RFP that is much more focused on housing being developed by nonprofits, smaller scale, infill. They're looking more for interesting building types. So that's where we see condo buildings, townhomes being developed through that funding. But it's every other year, partially because the lead time on some of those, again, if we have let's say a new developer, is longer, whereas the tax credit RFP, we're trying to make sure it lines up with the state's RFP. But yes, we do a number of those. We also, the CDA is looking at its own portfolio where we had some scattered site buildings where we did a renovation of, 2, 4, 8-plexes, but then we took duplexes that were kind of, they needed to come down, and we're putting back townhomes on Teresa Terrace. So part of that is that we'll learn what are the headaches? What are the market forces pushing against you to build this? Because we keep saying we want so much of it, but we're not seeing it happen. So part of that is we're funding it, we're building it, but then we'll do a case study on it to say, it was surprisingly expensive to add fire protection, or maybe it wasn't, or, upsizing, water, sewer, something like that caused an unexpected something or other.
I think actually what I was getting at, I just reviewed a case study of a project outside of Atlanta, Georgia, where they had different housing types like guest cottage and in Atlanta, servants' quarters. And they had qualifications of what these looked like, but the developer was then able to rent them out at like 30% AMI because like the servants' quarters had to have a requirement that they work there on site, and so they hired them to do the landscaping of the facilities. The guest quarters didn't have full-fledged kitchens, but they could have a hot plate, and then drew down the cost of those. So that's sort of what I'm looking at in the future of opportunity to integrate those into neighborhoods. But meet the affordable
We haven't seen
housing.
someone come forward with that yet, but.
Just a quick, I was just thinking about the population projections, and it sounds like you're expecting those to be updated on some kind of regular basis, and I wonder if we think that, the current projections are close, or do we think that there are some big disruptions that are going to change the outcome? See, I found an expert.
Yes, expert.
Yeah.
So there's a little bit of history to the projections that we have. For years, we relied on the projections that the State Department of Administration put out. Those tended for many years to kind of undercount and underproject. When we did the comprehensive plan in 2016 to 2018, we identified that as a need to have a more accurate projection that was a little bit less conservative. When the census, the 2020 decennial census came out, we realized that we were being too conservative as well. So we revised that again. So right now, I think looking at the past couple years of actual counts from DOA and from the U.S. Census Bureau, we're pretty accurate as to where we are. I would say we're going to be close. Obviously the margin of error gets larger as we go further out. There is a regional working team of communities and planners in the county that are looking at a countywide projection, very similar to what was done with the regional housing strategy. So as we continue with those discussions, we may update it based on some additional information that we have. And then we can continue to work with Dane County and the Capital Area Regional Planning Commission and other communities to identify a more reasonable and better projection for the region.
All right, any other discussion on these topics? Thanks, Heather and Matt, for the great presentations. Yeah. All right. We'll go to item 4, which is our amendments to our Plan Commission Policies and Procedure Manual. And just to, Megan suggested that I kick this one off as I've kind of onboarded as the commission chair and just kind of going through the agenda. I had some questions about some parts, some ways in which the agenda felt clunky, is the word I'll use sometimes, and asked if that was something that we could streamline or change a little bit. And so I had made some suggestions in that regard. And the agenda is actually prescribed in our Policies and Procedures Manual. And so after kind of that part of the process started, I think the staff, in particular Tim, right? Yeah, kind of said, well, there's other stuff in here that's also maybe a little outdated. Certainly there was a tone of tentativeness about virtual meetings in the Procedures Manual that I think is no longer appropriate. And so generally, this is kind of just a sort of a cleanup? How can we have a streamlined meeting? How can we make sure our procedures reflect what we're actually doing and what we actually should be doing? And so Megan, did you want to talk about it a little bit as well? I don't know that we want to go page by page through the red lines unless you guys want us to. So that's.
I saw one head shake.
All right.
Yeah, so as Emily said, she did a great job of kind of thinking about how we work through our agendas. Tim picked up a couple of things that are just helping us make sure that our policy and procedures manual are reflecting our current practices, as well as some changes to statute and MGO since the last time we did an update here. And then also one of the bigger things that's different about our work is the adoption of the area plan framework and the implementation of the first few area plans that weren't recognized in the sort of scope of the policy and procedure manual when it talks about how you use those plans for your decision making and what your role is in considering them. So the 30-some pages of markups essentially help us to make sure that all of that stuff has been refreshed. One thing in particular, there's two things in particular that I want to call your attention to. One is that within the section of the document that talks about our consent agenda and the use of the consent agenda, there's a lot of red lines in that section, but really our goal there was to make sure that that document read more like how you're using the consent agenda today, and particularly the sort of guidance that Emily reads at each of the meetings as we start our consent agenda. So hopefully that shows up for you as just clarification of what we're doing and doesn't significantly change the way we use the consent agenda. There's also a couple of references to parts of the city's code of ordinances, specifically the zoning ordinance related to demolition. Just want to be really clear that those changes are related to code changes that you all adopted back in 2021. That's not related to any of the things that we'll be discussing at our meeting next week about potential future changes to that. So just want to make sure that that's really clear. That's reflecting those choices that you made with that policy update back in 2021. And then, yeah, just lots of places where we talk about the relationship of area plans to the city's comprehensive plan and how we use those plans to guide the conditional use decisions and other questions that come before you from the development review space. So if there's any specific questions about any of the proposed changes, Kevin is also here. He worked on them. We're happy to answer any of those.
Thank you. I'll just point this out for information. I think this is a draft, correct?
Yes.
We're not presenting it yet for approval. I'm not even sure what the approval process is for general policies, but I just wanted to point out on page 23 and 24 with regard to demolition permits and the purview of the Plan Commission that we've got this pretty much new section on administratively approvable demolition permits, and this is one that we're working on right now with the assistance of the mayor's office on some new things related to demolition permits, and I think there's also a new alternative to what was originally submitted for the possibility. But I noticed that the fourth option for a administratively approved permit is that the building or buildings proposed for demolition are proposed to be replaced by residential or mixed-use buildings containing affordable income restricted housing units subsidized by the city of Madison. I don't think that's in the new version, so it's just probably something that should be checked for conformance.
Yeah, and we can definitely speak to this next week.
Okay.
It was, when we talk next week at the meeting about the proposed changes to the demolition code, that was intentionally not included because the process largely makes that current standard or that current exception irrelevant. So we're happy to go into more detail about that next week.
And just to,
I was just going to answer your question about procedures. So this is the Plan Commission's policy manual or procedures manual. This is something that you have the ability to update on your own. It's not something that needs to be referred for hearing or doesn't need to be referred to Common Council for any action. So we had teed this up that if you were ready to make changes to this, if you're ready to adopt this version, you're certainly welcome to do so tonight. If you'd like to wait, we can do that too. Relative to your point about the pending demolition ordinance that we'll talk about next week, if the commission wanted to make the changes that are suggested in here, but then give us the direction to further edit it if there's anything that needs to be revised pending the outcome of that ordinance, we could do that as well. So really, it's up to you on what your level of comfort is with making these changes.
Patrick.
This is a question, I guess, for Emily and Megan. I see in the current version as well as the cleaned up version, when registrants speak, it now says district number is, and it doesn't specifically say other identifying information isn't read, because sometimes committees and council have had a lot of negative feedback about other identifying information, and maybe it could be helpful to say that explicitly, but maybe it's not necessary. I don't know. But another question is, it doesn't detail who does what with the registrants, who reads this and that, and you two just, you're adults and you work it out, and it's great. But I wondered if it needed to be said for the future. I don't know. Maybe we'll just always trust that we'll have a chair and a secretary, that's your name in the meetings, right? Who get along famously. I don't know. just some ideas.
Oh, Emily and I did have a robust battle over who was going to read the registration list when she first started, but
I have conceded that ground for all kinds of good reasons. But, I'm not aware that there are specific instructions maybe for any of the commissions on that. I think when you come in and fill out your green piece of paper, or you do it virtually, you're asked for an address. So you are kind of surrendering some of your anonymity to speak at the meeting.
Yeah, we
it's an
did
interesting. I guess I'm wondering
receive
what
a
your
lot,
thoughts are.
especially at council. I think in the past there's been a lot of feedback for people that don't want their address read for various good reasons.
Yep. And so you will notice Patrick is referring to a red line that's on page 14 of the document, if anybody has it open. It's under Procedures for Hearings C. Our procedures manual did say that we would read the home address, which is part of what people submit when they register. We're suggesting that we just instead read the Alder District or the municipality of residence, and that's exactly why we propose that. Well, I haven't been to all of the city's boards and commissions, but certainly noted that council does not read anything related to a person's location. And I'm not sure what all the other boards and commissions do, but for that sensitivity, we were proposing changing this to be less specific. If you're supportive of that. In terms of the procedure about who reads the registrations, I guess I would defer to Emily on whether we would want that in the document. I know that your most recent past chair read them. Emily and I have kind of developed a working relationship where I think she thinks it's helpful to have staff read it just in case there's any late registrants or anything that happens that we kind of see after we've sent them to you. So it's possible to leave our procedures manual much more open-ended so that it's up to however the chair and the secretary want to manage that.
That makes sense to me. It's sort of like organizational bylaws. You don't want to get too specific.
Yeah.
One more related question. There's a mention of 5:30 cutoff for registrants, and oftentimes we let people in because either they've screwed up their registration or they come late. and we know they want to give public comment, I mean, I'm fine with, it seems like we handle it well in practice, but by putting the 5:30 deadline in there, I don't know if that impacts that ability. I mean, that's not new, right? Or I can't remember.
I don't think that's new. Do you have a page number where you're referencing that?
Yeah, it's not new. It says.
Yeah.
At the top of 14.
Thank you.
And I think that's more or less, it's a should and not a shall, and I think that's to give the public a heads up that at 5:30, regardless of the order, if the consent agenda is taken up at 5:30 or shortly thereafter, that you should register by 5:30 if you want your registration known
See
before
that
the
now.
consent
That's a good
agenda.
point.
Yeah.
Thanks.
But you're right. We do try to accommodate if there are late registrants on something that's not on your consent agenda.
I might follow Commissioner Heck down this similar rabbit hole. But on the subject of registrants, I believe we had gotten some feedback before about giving registrants a notice that their 3 minutes is almost up. I'm just wondering if we've had any thought on how to better manage it, because I've noticed in Zoom sometimes when you're trying to verbally tell people that, it kind of throws them off. And now that I've actually watched another commission's meeting, you can't see everybody all at once, and sometimes it's difficult just holding that sign up. So I don't know if we've gotten other feedback from the public, one way or another, if they appreciate this or not. But again, I don't know if it needs to be written down here either, but something else that's coming to mind.
Yeah, that's a great question. And the sign is something that we started with Emily. The public actually can't see that. It's just a way that we communicate so that she knows when people's time is approaching. Where I just came from in Burlington, one of the tools that the council used there was to put just a countdown clock on the screen so that members of the public could actively see their time remaining during their public comment period. The downside is then that they don't see you either. They just see the countdown timer on the screen. And so, but it's certainly something we could consider. I think the challenge is a lot of the things that we've been trying to do with keeping track of time, the public just doesn't see the way that our Zoom meetings are formatted.
I would just add to that because we had a lot of registrants last night for the Board of Public Works, and for the first time we used the displayed countdown clock.
Okay.
And it seemed to work very well, actually.
Great.
It certainly didn't offend the registrants because it gave them the immediate feedback that
They knew how much time
allowed
they
them
had
to
left.
do things.
Yeah. Okay.
I wonder if there's an audible, some kind of a, doorbell that dings it a minute or 30 seconds or something. But, yeah, I don't know.
It was just very low tech, but at Transportation Commission, the chair used to just set her phone timer, it's just a slight beep going over the things. It was not this jarring thing, but at least it was enough of a trigger that you knew you had.
Is that a virtual meeting, Derek?
Yes.
Okay, so it comes through.
So it picked up the microphone, yeah.
Okay.
That's good to know.
I usually do set a timer.
We both do, and I usually am like, oh, I hope my mic's not on when this timer goes off. So actually, that's good. That's a good thought.
That's an interesting.
Yeah. Okay.
I noticed in the staff comments a note about roll call, and I think it's a good idea if I'm reading it correctly, but I was wondering if you could explain it.
Yeah, so at the beginning of so most of my experience is on the Park Commission, and at the beginning of that meeting, the agenda says there's a roll call, and so the secretary just does a roll call. And in my experience, it's kind of a nice way to start the meeting because it makes sure everybody's mic is working and that they remember how to unmute themselves. And I think it gives the attendees who otherwise don't know exactly who's there and can't, without figuring out the code, they can't obviously tell who all the commissioners are. I think it I think it just sort of sets the tone and lets everybody know who's at the meeting participating on the board, so.
And I think, as Sarah said, from your experience watching another committee recently, for general members of the public, they only see whomever was last speaking. That's the only video they see. So I think just giving them more transparency about who's in the room at the beginning is also a way that this could be helpful.
Yeah, that sounds great. I'm now thinking just all these questions about the experience of a member of the public speaking, timers and all that. I think it would be great if the city could create some sort of like little video of like what someone from the public is seeing, so that we know if they're getting visual cues from us or what, that kind of stuff.
Okay.
And Megan, is it true? So I don't usually go back and watch the replays of meetings, but when I participated in a meeting on Zoom, I think that experience is maybe a little bit different than what gets recorded and posted on the city's YouTube channel, but maybe not.
I think what gets posted, and I don't know if he has the ability to say anything. I know Jesse, our tech facilitator, is watching us remotely. But I believe what gets posted is what the public sees.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, Kate.
Yeah,
This is Kate Smith, by the way, if anybody doesn't know Kate Smith.
I attended the Landmarks meeting this week to listen in on that discussion, and it was, most of the time, the screen was boxes of names. With no-
Yeah, their
with no
meeting is run
cameras
a
on.
little bit different.
Okay,
Yeah,
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 yeah, yeah.
that's a good point.
Okay. So, okay. Anything else? Does anybody want to make a motion on this? Is it general, do you guys generally feel like maybe we should wait and see what happens with the ordinance changes so that we do it once instead of twice? Or do it once with sort of a follow-on instruction? I think there's a couple ways to get at it. I don't think there's a wrong way to get at it, so.
I'm comfortable moving forward with these changes, and the next time we do it, it'll be that much easier.
Okay. So I'll take that as a motion to approve the changes, and Alderfield, thank you. We could actually all say aye if you wanted to, and since we're here in person, everyone in favor can say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? You can say aye or nay, that would be fine. All right. I think we have unanimous approval on those changes, so thank you. All right. So those are our special items of business. We still have a number of general categories on this agenda, but I think maybe we'll probably starting on March 3rd,
Yeah.
you'll see that new,
Yep.
a little bit tighter agenda format, and we'll see how it goes. Is there any business by members that folks would like to bring up? Patrick?
It's dangerous, but I just had a thought. Is it appropriate, even though it's not really on the agenda, to just brainstorm a little bit about future policy meetings,
I think that would be great.
if people have ideas? I don't.
Would you like to start?
Just came to my head, so I hadn't really thought about it.
Are you meaning for these meetings or just in general, topics that you want in the future? Okay.
I think maybe, so we have done some tentative planning of, we have a meeting in June and another one in September, October, and I think we have a general idea of what we think we'll cover, so we're happy to share that in the spirit of transparency.
That makes sense, because I know you talked to a lot of, all the
Yep.
commissioners and asked for ideas, but
Yep. I haven't gotten to everyone yet, but I did some more due diligence before the end of the year, so.
So what Emily and I have been talking about, and this is all open to change at this point, we have another special meeting on June 2nd. We've been talking about using that potentially as an opportunity for the teams that are working on the Southeast and Southwest area plans to give you an update on how those are going. We've talked a little bit about that maybe as an opportunity either to do some kind of tour related to those plans, or to do some kind of tour of like recent developments. And Emily asked us to look into the potential that we could do that meeting somewhere not downtown, like on one side of the city or the other, that would make the logistics of going and seeing a couple sites more workable. So we are looking into whether there's like another city building that we could use for a meeting location. So that is something we're looking into. We've also reached out to folks that work in the Department of Transportation about giving us the kind of next level update on the work they're doing around the curb management plan for the city. I know this is a topic that you all have talked about in the past. And then we actually asked Kate to come to our meeting in June to give just an update on the legal framework that you all work within in the state of Wisconsin, and maybe to give us some updates on recent case law or other like city level appeals, things that would be instructive for your work in the future. We also have a meeting then slotted for mid-October that we're looking at maybe some topics related to how we think about our long-term planning together with the school district and what they think about when they're thinking about long-term planning. And then maybe another update from the sustainability manager for the city about the city's recently adopted sustainability plan and how that connects to your work. So those are maybe fall right now more in the bucket of the kinds of things that we did tonight. But certainly if there are specific policies that you would like to get into in those discussions, we can work on, what those would look like as well.
I would just say that this was very helpful tonight in terms of the housing update, and there's, in Housing Forward, we've got a lot on the agenda of things we'd like to kick off, and I think June would be too soon, but maybe October we could just hold ourselves accountable because we're involved in making some of those things happen, that we might take a look at just how far we've gotten on the very progressive agenda.
Again, off the top of my head, I apologize. I'm thinking about a way for us to learn or understand the input that we get primarily from UDC and landmarks. And, we hear during our discussions, oh, this is an advisory opinion only, but maybe learning a little bit more about that. And I think there are some of us who it's easy to get confused. I know it is for me sometimes when, even though I hear the words advisory, it's like, well, do we have to do that? Or this whole business about referring things back to those bodies is confusing, and maybe kind of going through that, a discussion about how that works. Are we doing it correctly? Or are we not? I don't know. Again, just off the top of my head.
Work for Kate.
Okay.
I'm kind of, excuse me, interested in our variety of stormwater rules. Those on, well, I think many of us remember a particular approval that got a lot of stormwater related attention last year. And I've never had a reason to learn more about how a stormwater ordinance relates to a specific urban infill redevelopment project. But I also understand that the rules are different for properties that are older than the ordinance itself. And I'm curious about how stormwater rules apply to greenfield development, either subdivisions or how outlots are reserved and their size and placement, and the way that influences land use and neighborhood planning. Just an idea. Thank you.
One more thought. See, you've opened up
Good. This is a brainstorm.
total dogfight or something here. I don't know, but it might be interesting sometime to do a case study of a particular development that Plan Commission was involved in, but also, CDBG or something like that, because some of those get very interesting. I was thinking, for instance, of the Nino's development, or Nino, the pizza place development, Uno's. anyway, some people will know why I said that, but anyway, it's got like 7 layers of financing and so forth that went into it, and just the whole process that Plan Commission was involved in, that CDBG was involved in to put a whole project together that has some level of affordability just might be an interesting and instructive way to let us know what the process looks like from beginning to end.
Okay.
Any other brainstorm thoughts? That's a great idea, Patrick. Thank you.
Okay, one more because it's been on my mind recently, and this might take the input of the city attorney's office, I imagine. I'm interested in understanding how our standards of approval relate to subdivisions and even large apartment developments in the hinterlands. And the public sometimes want us not to approve something because it promotes sprawl. And there's no metro, and there's no this or that, and it's bad for the climate. And we haven't, I don't think, tackled those arguments, but it might be good to have a hypothetical discussion about them before we get there. I don't know, just an idea.
Okay.
I don't know what, maybe just a hypothetical discussion of some subdivision platting or something, and could we apply the standards of approval to that in such a way to make it less likely to be approved? I don't know. Maybe, I think the city attorney's office would probably say, don't go there, but I'd like to hear that.
Okay. Any others? All right. Thanks for those suggestions. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, very much. Good. Communications, I think, is covered in business by members for the most part. I don't think we have anything else.
Yeah, I think my understanding is that maybe once upon a time this was intended to indicate if you had received any communications about anything that was on the agenda that you might disclose those or share them. So maybe as we think about moving into the new sort of order of the agenda, just a reminder, the policy document does talk about, like, if you receive communications about the business that you're doing, to forward them for the rest of the commission as well.
Secretary's report, Maggie.
All right. So like I said at our last meeting, you can see that we have a long list of things coming up in our next couple meetings. In particular, I wanted to call your attention to just a couple items for each of those meetings. We'll be talking about 2 zoning code changes, 2 packages of zoning code changes, some related to kind of housing solutions, and then the other related to the changes to our demolition process. Alder Ugair mentioned that one earlier. Just want to make sure you all know that there is material posted. There will be some additional material posted, just to give you a heads up that you have a chance to take a look at it before our discussion next Monday. And then for our meeting on March 3rd, similarly, we're going to be talking about an amendment to the ad hoc committee's report on the Lamp House plan. Historic resource in downtown. This has been through 2 boards and commissions so far, and included some robust discussion about this proposal. So just want to call your attention to that as well, so you have a chance to take a look at it before it's on your agenda on March 3rd. So.
Megan, could you, I think that I'm supposed to ask you questions. So could you give a short summary of the Landmarks Commission discussion on demo and on the Lamp House, or at least the action that they took?
I'm looking at Kate just to make sure I stay like kind of in bounds of what we talk about in our meetings.
And I think just the action that they took might be.
Sure.
kind of
Yep.
enough.
That makes sense. So the Landmarks Commission, let me start with Lamp House Plan. Both the UDC and the Landmarks Commission have looked at the proposed changes to that report, and for various reasons have recommended that those changes be placed on file. I would say that generally those recommendations were made in the vein of we have an upcoming downtown plan process, and that may be a more appropriate venue for us to consider questions about what we want the development pattern around that historic resource to be like. The Landmarks Commission talked about the proposed demo code changes at their meeting on Monday night. Their recommendation was ultimately that they were supportive of the proposed changes that dealt with how they do historic reviews for projects, essentially codifying what they've been using in their procedure manual for those recommendations to you. But they asked for a referral back from council for the rest of it, particularly the zoning code pieces that have to do with your process after they make those recommendations. So that referral back to council doesn't happen until after your discussion next week, so we don't know what will happen with that yet.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
All right. Any other questions for Megan? I'd put her on the spot, so.
That's what I'm here for.
All right. All right, we have one more chance for announcements, but I think we've covered all the announcements. And if we're ready, I would entertain a motion to adjourn in a second. All right, Alderfield and Commissioner Solheim. Oh, Colin is on the notes. All right, thanks, Colin. All right, all in favor? Thank you. We will stand adjourned. Thanks for the great discussion.